Hello Internet, Yulia speaking, and today we're gonna talk about my recent reads. I haven't been reading much this year, which is really annoying for me because after I did my A-levels last year, I was like, this is gonna be the year to read and do all the things, but that just kind of hasn't really been happening, and I've been kind of busy and kind of focused on movies much more than books, but I'd like to remedy that situation. So here are my recent reads. So the first book I actually read this year was Reboot, and it's on my Kindle. I've been trying to get to Reboot for a while because it just seemed like a really interesting type of story. It's based in a world where there's been like a plague or something, and people, when they die, some of them actually wake up again as like sort of zombies, and the longer you stay dead during that period of time, the more emotionally dead you are when you wake up afterwards. And the story is focused on Ren, who is very emotionally dead, and she is in this sort of training facility where most teens are taken once they wake up to be trained as soldiers by this big organization, and they sort of become more high-ranking the more emotionally dead they are because they're like more stable soldiers, and she's basically an instructor because of that. And this kid comes in who is basically still human. He died and then he woke up really quickly afterwards, so emotionally he's way much more there present than she is. And like the more she starts getting to know this kid, the more she starts thinking that maybe they're not as emotionally not there as the organization makes them believe. It's about that kind of whole story and that back concept, and I don't want to say anything else, but I did really enjoy this book. There is a second one which I'm gonna get to at some point in the future. It's on the list. I'll get there. This one gets a 4 from me. Next up is actually a reread because after I read Reboot, I was not in the mood for anything for ages, and generally what helps me get back into reading is rereading something that I know I really loved and I know it's going to be fun, and I speed through it because I basically know it by heart, and that book was Perfect Chemistry. This is full of cliches, and it's about a guy who is trouble and a girl who is like really good, and kind of their worlds colliding and them starting to realize that maybe both were kind of hiding behind their image in the end. And it just, there were loads of cliches, but I love this. The way it's written is so fun, the characters are amazing. I can't find anything bad in this one. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's actually a series, and I would recommend each and every book in that series, but the first one is always going to be my favorite. It basically follows, the series follows the lives of the 3 brothers who are like trouble, and each one has like a separate synopsis and a separate story, but the characters do come into play a little bit in the later books, so I would still recommend reading them in the right order. So yeah, one of my favorites, just so 5 stars, obviously. Then, since I was still not in the reading mood, I decided why not pick up a graphic novel, because that's gonna be fast and I'll get through it, and maybe the story will make me interested in picking up reading again. And that graphic novel was Nimona. Loads of people have talked about it, loads of people have recommended it. I definitely really enjoyed it, but I feel like because I love my romance, this was just, I wanted more from it. And I don't think there's a sequel, but I would really want one, actually. The art style is really cute. I definitely enjoyed that. It's it's fun, but it has like emotional connections in it, which I really enjoyed. I think this was my first graphic novel. That's weird to say. I did read like webtoons and stuff before, but this is my first proper graphic novel. So this one gets 3 stars from me, which is good, but as I said, there was definitely stuff that I felt like I wanted more. Like I wanted more answers at the end there, I wanted more from the characters, I wanted more from the relationships, but overall I did really like it. And hopefully it's gonna make me read more graphic novels, because I've got a huge list on Goodreads. If you haven't seen me on Goodreads, the link is in the description. I have a huge TBR, like it's getting into 2,000 books. I don't think I can read that in my lifetime. Next up is the Precious Stone trilogy, so Ruby Red, Emerald Blue, okay, Ruby Red, Sapphire Blue, and Emerald Green, which I can't show you copies of because I read them on my Kindle, and the Kindle one doesn't have a cover image on it, so here's what they look like. I mentioned them briefly in a couple other videos because I binged watched the movies as well, so if you want to check where I mentioned that, it's right here. Yeah, I really liked them. I gave each book in the trilogy 4 stars, which is a pretty good rating. They didn't quite reach favorites, but they are very good and I really enjoyed them. The characters are really fun. I like that it felt like a whirlwind. Like, I started reading it and I could not put it down. The 3 books blended together for me. I could not talk about one without getting stuff from the other, because I generally can't remember where one ends and the other one begins, and I feel like that's what happens when I genuinely really like a book, that I speed through them so quickly that it's all just one story in my head. And it was a very good overall arc, and I liked how things developed through it and how the relationships developed. It was really cute. I didn't mention what it's about, but it's about this girl that's in a family of time travelers. So there's time traveling gene in her family, and there's another family where they also have a time traveling gene, and basically in her family it was meant to be her cousin, but then one day she just travels back in time and she's unprepared because she has not gotten all the lessons on history and how to speak and how to move and how to dance in that time period, and it's all a bit chaotic but in the most fun way. I definitely recommend it. Next up, I read Ready Player One, which also has an awful cover on my Kindle, so I'm just gonna put an image that's the actual cover. The issues of reading ebooks. So I read this one because I knew I was gonna watch the movie at the cinema, so I thought probably best to read the book first because it had been on my list and I didn't want to be spoiled for everything and then read the book. I gave this one 4 stars because I think it was really good and it had a lot of those futuristic themes in it that were really cool to explore. If you don't know, Ready Player One is about the future, where it's not like too far into the future where it feels unrealistic, but kind of close future. And here there's a virtual reality called the Oasis, which is the creation of this super rich dude that got rich because of this. And basically the creator of the Oasis has just recently passed away, and since he didn't have any close relatives, he put into his will that whoever finds this Easter egg inside the Oasis can basically own it and do whatever they want with it. So it's about the whole world suddenly going after this Easter egg, and there's lots of aspects to it, and it kind of goes through the whole idea of like people living their lives inside of this virtual reality essentially, instead of, you know, actual real life. And I think the book went through those aspects really well. I was very impressed. It was kind of slow at times and I was kind of annoyed with the main character sometimes, but I think that's what made it more realistic, and I think that was essential to the plot, that it was slow, that you felt that time was passing. And it was a really long book. I had an ebook, so I can't really show you that it was long, but it felt long. Let me see how many pages actually it was. What? It's like only 400 pages. It felt very long. I did read it really quickly because I was hooked, but at some points I kind of had to push through because I knew I was going to watch it the next evening, so I was like, I need to read this before I go to the cinema. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. The only thing is, I don't think it's not a kid's book. Like, it doesn't have anything, well no, it kind of does have some inappropriate bits, but it doesn't have anything that's like really in your face inappropriate. But I think to understand it completely, I'd say like at least a 15-year-old. Well, I mean, I don't know, I guess it depends on what kind of teen you are. But yeah, next up was another reread because I was in a slump again. I reread Hush Hush again with the not fantastic cover. This is an all-time favorite of mine, so 5 stars. It has loads of cliches, but I didn't care because sometimes the cliches are annoying, but sometimes they work. And whenever I want to feel better, I just go back into the story and I don't mind a single bit. It's about this girl, Nora. Into her life comes Patch, and she starts realizing that there's something not quite right about him, like he's hiding something, but at the same time she's very intrigued. I know, it's the classic trope, but this was actually really fun. It was suspenseful at times. It wasn't completely cliche. Like, I felt like the characters had some depth, and even the side characters as well. I really love these books. Becca Fitzpatrick, I really love her books. Next up, I finally finished reading the Cardturner. I'm gonna put a picture here. I do actually have the physical copy of this, but since I finished reading it while I was still back home, I left the book there because I was like, I'm not gonna drag it with me. So the Cardturner is a bit more of a middle grade book. It's about, honestly, it took me years to finish reading it, so I can't even explain it properly. Essentially, it's about bridge, which may sound weird, but you know, hear me out for a second. Bridge, the game, as in the card game. It's about this kid whose uncle is really rich and really ill. He is also an avid bridge player, like a really good one, and this kid's mom and dad basically want to make sure that they're included in the will once this rich uncle dies. So they send this kid to be the card turner for his uncle, and his uncle, because of his illness, or I don't really remember why, but he is blind, and so he can't like look at his own cards and he can't like play, but he has this incredible memory and he's really smart. So all he needs is someone to tell him his cards once, and then he knows how to play, and he just says which ones to put down. And this book, first of all, the whole bridge aspect was pretty cool. I learned quite a few things about that, but then in the beginning I felt like I was learning, but then I kind of paused reading it for like many months. So when I picked it back up, I was like, I don't know how this works anymore. So I kind of skipped a lot of the bridge bits. Like, I didn't skip them, I still skimmed them, but I didn't really get it anymore. But even if you're not looking at the bridge part, like, the story itself is still quite fun, and it has its emotional bits, and it has some really nice quote-worthy things that I can't show you now because they're tagged in the book that's not here with me, but you'll just have to take my word for it. I gave this one 4 stars. I was pretty impressed. This was a Lewis Sharr? No, I think it's Lewis Sharr book, and I actually had one of his books as school reading. We were at Holes, and I was not as impressed with that one, but I think maybe that's because it was school reading, and when you start picking everything to bits, it kind of loses its interest. So yeah, 4 stars. Then I actually read a series that I really enjoyed. I picked it up on a whim. It was nowhere near on my TBR list, but I was like, I'm just in the mood for this, so I'm gonna go ahead. And I picked up the first book and I could not put the rest down, so I read for like 2 days straight, and I read 3 books. This one is White Hot Kiss, Stone Cold Touch, and Every Lost Breath. I would compare this series to, I guess, Hush Hush in a way. I felt like it had similar themes and the characters had some personality comparisons that I really loved. It was like a retelling of a favorite story, except everything was completely different. I don't know how to explain myself, but like the vibe that I got from it was just something that I knew I enjoyed straight away, and the humor was fantastic. If you look on my Goodreads again, I published my highlights from my ebook, and oh my god, so many good one-liners. I thoroughly enjoyed myself in these. They're new favorites. I gave 5 stars to all of them. I loved that, like, even though there was a triangle, I never felt like pained about it. Like, I definitely love most when in books, like, even if there is some kind of drama and like some kind of issue, because like those are necessary for the plot to move, I definitely always love when you're still certain, like, you know that this is going the way you want it to go and you're very happy about that. So this was that kind of story. Basically, the main plot is that Lila is half demon, half warden. Now, wardens are these gargoyle-like creatures that are sort of descendants of angels. Kind of weird to explain. I've never read anything with gargoyles before, but I was not mad at it, actually. So yeah, basically she's got the good and the bad in her, and for now she lives with the wardens because she doesn't know anything about her parents, so she's essentially an orphan living with the wardens and hating her demon side because that's how she was raised to behave about it. And the one aspect of her, like, demon nature that does worry her and everyone else is that essentially if she kisses someone, she will suck their soul out, literally. And it's not only that, but she craves it as well. Like, she needs to take people's souls. I mean, like, she doesn't need it to, like, survive, but she's, like, addicted to it before even trying, sort of thing. When she suddenly starts coming into contact with a demon who doesn't seem to be as bad as the wardens paint demons to be, there comes intrigue, because demons don't have souls, so there would be nothing to suck out if she potentially kissed him. You know where I'm going with this? But yeah, this was really fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it. And finally, my most recent read was Beyond a Darkened Shore. I got this book in a Fairy Loot box, and at first I was really skeptical about ordering those boxes because I'm like, I don't know what's gonna come, I don't know if I'll enjoy it, and I was so impressed. I've definitely subscribed to that for many months to come because this book was perfect. It's a fantasy standalone, which are very rare, and I love that about it because I could not commit to a series right now, but this was perfect. It has a very Irish vibe to it. Well, I mean, they are in Ireland, but it's like fantasy Ireland, and there's a lot of Norse mythology in there as well, and I quite enjoy Norse mythology, mostly because of Marvel and what I've heard from that, but I really love mythology in general, so it was really cool to see aspects of that. I'm like, I know what that is, you know, and all these names coming up, then I'm like, oh, that rings a bell. It was really fun. It's about this girl who has like this magical power thing where she can control the mind of someone, and she is seen as kind of like witch-like in her town, even though she is the princess, and her family also kind of like shies away from her and kind of really wary around her. But at some point she gets a prophecy that the land is being invaded, and it's not by their constant enemies, the Northmen, but by some kind of mythical giants that are coming to end the world. And basically she has to team up with one of the Northmen whom she despises, and adventure ensues from there. This book has everything in good proportions. It has the romance, the adventure, it has the touching moments, it has the painful ones. I didn't necessarily cry, no, can't say that. I did cry. I did, but I'm not gonna say why. Just that I would definitely recommend this one. I gave it 5 stars. Okay, those were all my recent reads. I hope these are some recommendations to you. I'm hoping I will read more in the near future, or I suppose not in the near future because I have exams right now, but in the summery future. I put up videos every Friday. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you like it and subscribe maybe if you want to see more book and film related things. And end of rant.